Alright, we're on to episode 23 of Halloween Horror Movie Reviews 4. So where are we going? Well, we're going to one of my least favorite territories of the 8 films to die for garbage. Except this one is actually one worth dying for. And in this area, a sacrifice is going to be made.
Drop on by the Clown Cafe. Drop on by the Clown Cafe. The grub is downright gruesome, but your appetite's obey. 'Cause food's a little funny, food's a little funny, food's a little funny at the Clown Cafe. Drop on by the Clown Cafe, your favorite meals on wheels. The menu is disgusting and it's full of special deals. Nothing here is good for you, so grab yourself a tray. 'Cause food's a little funny at the Clown Cafe. Drop on by the Clown Cafe. Drop on by the Clown Cafe. Gobble up your order quick before it runs away. 'Cause food's a little funny at the Clown Cafe. Why not visit after school and have yourselves a bite? An appetizing appetizer certain to delight. We haven't done it right unless it makes your teeth decay. 'Cause food's a little funny at the Clown Cafe. Drop on by the Clown Cafe. Drop on by the Clown Cafe. The grub is downright gruesome, but your appetite's obey. 'Cause food's a little funny, food's a little funny, food's a little funny at the Clown Cafe.
Hey everyone, it's Don G. Corleone here, and I'm here with episode 23 of Halloween Horror Movie Review Season 4. And this episode is going to be for a horror film from that infamous horror festival I've shitted on this channel, 8 Films to Die For. And some of you who have been familiar with my channel since the beginning may already know of one film from this shitty-ass studio, this shitty-ass After Dark Horrorfest or After Dark Films company. Or the legend himself, Courtney Solomon. Yes, that stupid hack. So anyway, what's this one gonna be? This one, believe it or not, is gonna be for an unexpected surprise from the studio. And this episode is gonna be for 2007's Borderland. Yeah, so what's this film about? Well, 3 college students, Phil, Ed, and Henry, take a road trip into Mexico for a week of drinking and coffee fun, only to have Phil find himself a captive of a group of satanic Mexican drug smugglers who kill tourists and who are looking for a group of new ones to prepare for a sacrifice. Yeah, there's the plot of that. And not much is known about the production of this movie because, well, nothing is really ever known about the productions of any films that are part of the 8 Films to Die For festival. All that we can really know is that the film was selected as one of the 8 Films to Die For at the After Dark Horrorfest, the second one they did in 2007. The year another infamous film I'm going to get to in a bit came out in the same studio. And it's actually based off a true story of Adolfo de Jesus Constanzo, a drug lord and the leader of this religious cult that practiced human sacrifice. And Constanzo and his followers, which were called the narco-satanists, they kidnapped and murdered a Texas junior of the University of Texas, Mark J. Kilroy, in the spring of 1989. So once it was released to the festival, it got decent review reactions from people. Typical for some of their less bad films. As for my reaction, well, before we get into my reaction to this movie, let's cap off with what 8 Films to Die For really is. You all know I'm familiar with 8 Films to Die For. And just about all of their movies suck ass. 8 Films to Die For was a festival where apparently horror movies that were deemed too graphic, too shocking, too disturbing for audiences or the public were released into theaters, as they claim. But all of their movies are literally shitty sci-fi channel films with nothing graphic in them. So yeah, I've never liked Horrorfest or After Dark Films or Courtney Solomon. I thought all of them did a shitty ass job with Craptivity, which to me is just the worst Saw ripoff I've ever seen, and you're all pretty much familiar with me bashing Craptivity to death on this channel. Y'all remember when I ranted on that movie in the first season when I began YouTube 3 years ago during the lockdowns. And I even did a rant commentary on it, I think around earlier this year. It's still a shitty movie. Some YouTuber fellows of mine have seen films of theirs like Dark Rider the Abandoned, and they're all shitty as fuck. From what I've heard. I've seen some of their films too, and I hate every one of them I've seen. I've seen From Within, I hated that. I saw one that starred the annoying Halloween 2007 Rob Zombie Laurie actress. Hated that. Craptivity wasn't part of the festival, but it was made by the same company behind this festival, so I hated that. Hated Butterfly Effect 3. Now, though, for this movie, Borderland, I'm going to say this. This is the one movie that I have loved from them. Maybe one of their films will be... Maybe sometimes they can make something tolerable, but I have only seen the shitty stuff from them. This is the only one of these movies from 8 Films to Die For, or 8 Films to Not Die For, or 8 Films to Die Up My Ass For, that I have loved. Why? Because it's not some sci-fi channel creatures, nor ghosts, nor about naked hot girls like on the posters for 8 Films to Die For. This is based off a real-life cult and a real-life murder crime. And there was some good stuff in this one. Like, the first plus here is the fact that the real-life story makes this one all the more threatening and terrifying. Its realistic bent is found throughout most of the beginning of the film. And it's just about the whole wandering around town with the cult watching them areas of the film, especially once it gets involving the police in the matter. These here add a cruel twist to the camping scenes where our victim is being held captive on the ranch, as well as the actions and attitudes from the cult, which all makes this one feel a lot more realistic than most others out there. Another good feature in the film's rather great encounters with the cult, which are quite frequent and manage to make the film feel brutal and exciting. And there's a great one early on that shows the realistic bent on the film as well as the cult's attitudes, with the group being jumped in the middle of the street in full view of the police, only for them to turn around and not intervene, despite there being plenty of opportunity and cause for them to do so. There's also this fairly fun escape attempt at the compound that's quite good, with a different landscape around the area offering some really fun times and a rather well executed series of tactics to get away from being quite thrilling. The predictable finish notwithstanding, like the big one here though, undoubtedly the chase through the motel hallways, with the cramped corridors not offering much of the form of hiding spaces, and the cult members being armed with machetes not helping matters. The fact that it goes on for several floors, into one of the rooms, up the side of the building and onto the roof, which accumulates in a rather exciting encounter and all part of the fun. It's got pretty much everything required for one of these scenes, with a logical reason for a chase, thrilling stalking moments, close encounters, a lot of blood and gore in this movie, and a great setting and a perfect conclusion. And it does stay interesting the whole way through, with a lot of last-minute saves, and it pretty much remains great the whole way through. Even the finale with its orbital and actionary cliches of storming the hideout with machine guns, and such is a lot of fun as well. Not as good as the pristine motel chase though, but in the last plus here, the blood and gore. And it's quite excessive here. There's a lot, including amputations, hatchets slicing up the face, a series of slices across the legs and back, and a brutal eyeball removal scene and a parade of gunshots. There's much more here than that there. And this one here has a lot to like about it. Now, yes, does the film have a great start? Well, the film fairly does start formulaic. And sometimes I was rolling my ass at the intro when they introduced the hero, who was of course off on his own thinking his profound pure thoughts, and the way the heroine was introduced was pretty weak. But of course, with the disturbing brutal opening scene though, not too bad. And once the characters all get introduced, the movie takes off. It combines a tense story of friends in a foreign land. They have to fend for themselves, so they come to the realization they're on their own and trying to rescue their friend along with the kidnapped boy's story. It all amasses into this tight, thrilling story that gets your blood pumping. The characters are also well played out. In fact, they have the blessing of being victims that are actually smart. While Henry was wanting from the gang, usually I was thinking like just breaking a door, and he does that. Totally. Love that right there. When he looks out the window, you're like, dude, climb up the roof. It's not that far. He actually does that. He doesn't do anything fucking stupid for a change. Actually makes a smart decision that we want him to make. In addition to that, the character development and acting was sufficient enough to generate empathy for all the characters without bogging down too much backstory. The characters do start as stereotypes, but evolve very well to the point when you root for them rather than dismiss them as murder meat. And the American and Mexican movie from the border between USA and Mexico is loosely actually based on a true story, and that's hard to accept. But evil exists, and it's awful to get to know about it. It's a story to see and comprehend. Like, the three young guys go down to Mexico one summer. They experience that one of them disappears. One of them gets kidnapped by humans, believing in humans sacrificing to the spirit Nagana. The cult leader is based off a real-life cult leader. So that adds to the terror of the story. And he thinks he's the so-called godfather of Matamaros. And apparently they found more than 50 corpses of brains and spinal cords were removed. That's pretty much a true story right there. And the case still isn't even closed. Because several members of the cult were apparently still on the run when they made this. And even despite this also being set in Mexico, even this doesn't lie. Like, I mentioned this many other films, but even this doesn't act like Machete and lie about being some gruesome flick when it was just a political PSA. No, they don't reference the border just because it's set in Mexico. They don't talk about the border in this whole movie. No. There's none of that dumb shit. So this one actually lives up to its title. The film, technically, it's good and well done in all aspects. The colors are gritty, made with color filters, like many Latin American films. This film is like very suitable. Maybe it is a little too much and sometimes can be difficult to see clearly outdoors in the sun. Indoors, it's done better. And after a while, after the movie spends enough time creating its setting and theme that it is, it picks up pace, and you've gotten the concept and are beginning to become interested in how exciting and well done it is becoming. It is slow paced, but considering the first half is just made up of showing how the three friends are wanting to have a good time, getting wasted until one of them's kidnapped too, later discovered, being used for human sacrifice, that might throw some people off. But it does have some points of high interest. And even though it is slow paced after a disheartening opening, it's nonetheless extremely entertaining throughout the remainder. The acting is likable, it's not wonderful acting, it is tolerable, the characters are manageable, and the story will accompany itself at times. It's fun and it's thrilling. And the movie manages to entertain so well. And one thing I really admire about this movie was how unbelievably realistic the violence was portrayed in it. Like, I like watching a lot of violence in most horror movies because there's times when it can be very great and it can be very gnarly, and I'm a bit of a gorehound myself, but the violence in this movie, it's very realistically well done. I definitely cringed quite a few times, looked away at times during the film. The rooftop scene was pretty brutal, and the characters' actions and reactions were all very real, as were the action scenes, and it really manages to attain a solid sense of realism, which a lot of these stupid A films that die for movies fail to do. The DV-style cinematography adds to the gritty realism of it as well, and it enhances all of this, and it gives a feeling of almost being there to see it all happen, and you get some voodoo witchcraft aspects into the mix, plus the fact that villains are for once not masked superhuman beasts, and not like CGI creatures you find in this whole Horrorfest stuff, but they're real people, and it makes things even eerier. Borderlands is an example of a low-budget horror suspense movie that can really work. No major actors, no expensive special effects, and the camera work isn't the best. While Borderland is full of characters we care about, and the suspense rises, watch them try to stay alive one more night. Borderlands, like, the characters here actually do more. Unlike our lead in Craptivity did. So there's that. They're actually not that stupid. They actually try to do shit. And the tension in this movie, it's very high, and the atmosphere is genuinely scary. The cultists get introduced in a terrifying way as two cops explore their darkened hideout in this part, and we get presented the cultists as having these supernatural powers. They say they cannot be held in jails, and bullets cannot hurt them, and demonic whispering plays while they're on screen, and undergoes the validity of their claim of having supernatural powers. The visual style, sound, and acting all does a great job of setting the perfect atmosphere for a great horror movie. And the director of this movie, Zev Berman, I think this shows that Zev Berman should have did more films after this, because he never made another film since this cult classic film. As of this year. Like, Zev Berman proves he knows how to create utter terror and edge on the seat suspense in a scary as hell way. Director Berman even does fantastic cinematography for this movie, because it's drenched in a gritty, grimy texture. It covers the whole movie in like some sort of grime, and it's really creative and visually stunning, and it looks as so hyper-intensive raw as hell. And some scenes are fantastic pure horror, such as like the scene with the Mexican Zulu cult's ranch scene, where our character Phil, who's played by Ryder Strong from Cabin Fever, our kidnapped victim of this film, tries to escape, and he falls into this pit of half-burnt, half-buried corpses, then makes a run for the Creepville Ranch and onto a desert road, and then a scary-looking cowboy cult member riding a horse comes up behind him out of nowhere and lassos the guy, and it's done so intensely with a shaky camera view that disorienting and raw, like how the terrified character is at that moment. And Ryder Straw gives one hell of a tragic and excellent performance that's honestly underrated and raw, and he makes the movie excellent. There's a lot of excellent cinematography on show here too. It's made stylish, it looks amazing and dreamlike at times. The violence is shocking, disturbing, and harrowing. It's raw and real looking violence encased in an absolute sense of dread throughout the movie. It's uncomfortable to watch, and knowing it's based on real events too. A religious satanic voodoo cult, they're terrifying in this movie. And the fact, like, there's real people like this out there, and it's terrifying and makes everything we see all the more horrifying. It only starts off as a horror movie, and after the opening credits, and switches gears and becomes more of a thriller. And it doesn't mean you wouldn't, and that does not mean that it'll make you disappointed. Because at all. Because don't let that ruin the movie for you. And the script was executed very convincingly, the acting was consistent and solid, and Brian Presley's Ed was excellent and convincing, and Jake Mugsworthy gives us an excellent rendition of party-loving Henry. And as for the cult and cult members, the script as executed gives the cultists such a strong flavor, but giving us convincing portrayals of severely very distinctively wicked members of the cult, and the leader of the cult, Santillan, now not like nearly as silent as Gustavo, like, because he gives to Gustavo, which was to me very sadistic, creepy, and scene-dominating, that's, you could really put him in the same pantheon as any other nasty horror characters like Jason and Michael Myers and Hannibal Lecter, but sadly because this movie's not as well known, it wouldn't happen. And the cinematography, more about the cinematography, is consistently outstanding, with some really great visuals, and I even love the scenes in the amusement park, and some of the indoor scenes too, like the early scene of a policeman looking down a blue corridor with a statue of the Virgin Mary and a knee chain in the wall behind him. Another which one's the female characters is climbing this indoor circular staircase. And almost all the scenes were really composed very effectively, and the gore scenes were as gory and creepy and scary as one could witness. And when it comes to the finale of this movie, you do have a nice finale that's sometimes downhill and sometimes good. How does it go? Well, Henry gets hacked to death by several men with machetes on the roof of their hotel. Very brutal scene right there. Then Ed and Valeria decide to go to Ulysses to go kill the men who abducted Phil. But we find out that Phil has immediately been killed, so it's too late to save Phil, so that's one down part of the film for me. That does not stop Ulysses from shooting the leader of the cult to death after being shot himself. Ed, Valeria, and Ulysses travel down the road to a house inhabited by an old man, where Ulysses bleeds to death. Cult members follow then Ed and Valeria to the house, and the two risk their lives to kill the remaining members, and decide to swim across the Rio Grande, 2 kilometers north of their location. Like, that's the thing, though. And that just kind of cuts off there. Just as it starts to get epic, the finale just ends the movie right there, before anything else can get really epic. And then the movie just ends with this caption explaining that several kilos of cocaine got found in containers with human hair, 50 bodies got exhumed from a mass grave at the ranch, and then Ed and Valerie were caught swimming across the river, and they were caught and questioned, and then several suspects remain at large. So the cult is still out there. It does have a fun showdown, but after the final scene, our real ending is just 5 scenes of epilogue text that just feel like they go on forever. So that's going to bring us to the bad qualities of this movie. And our first bad quality would definitely be the sound. The sound is just horribly washed out, obscure, and sometimes almost non-existent, as is the case of several gunshots that sounded like pencils tapping on a table. And like, the movie's sound couldn't really be that bad. It's like, really. And the story, it's pretty eerie, but it's also a little generic at times. Like, I've already seen plenty of horror films like this, but this one's kind of reasonable. Like, the protagonists aren't completely unlikable, they don't do too many stupid things, and you can basically root for their plight. And when the last segment of Borderland rolls around, it's kind of when Borderlands starts to kind of fall flat on its face, and it's revealed that, contrary to how the movie was presenting itself, the cultists have like no powers at all. They're not normal crazy, they're just normal crazy humans, and it kind of takes a lot of wind out of Borderlands sails. Borderland could have been a little more fascinating if the Kojos had to follow through the supernatural angle of the cultists being more than human, giving them dark powers bestowed by their demonic gods. But Borderland copped out of this area and took the realistic approach. The cultists just lose all their mystique and most of the scariness. It also forces the movie to resolve itself with this nonsensical cliche shootout between the fictional youths and the cultists. And climax of the movie is just a huge letdown in what the movie acted like. It was building itself towards this epic like showdown. It was some kind of supernatural showdown, but we never would have seen before. But the viewer just only gets a dopey shootout, like whichever one has seen a million times before, and there are 2 leads just swim in the river, and we never just see what happens after that. We just see it through text, which is like 5 text screens, and they feel like they just go on for a very, very long time. There's like 5 text screens you have to sit through before the credits roll. Despite those problems, Borderland is definitely one After Dark Horrorfest 8 Films to Die For movie. I can say it's worth a watch and a buy, and it definitely does not deserve to be called the title of 8 Films to Die Up Into My Ass, as I like to call it, films to die for, or 8 films to not die for. This is one film to definitely die for. In the end, definitely watch and buy Borderland for your collection. If you finally want to see a good so-called 8 films to die for movie that's actually good and isn't the same boring sci-fi channel shit. Anyways, that's it for my review of Borderland. If you're wondering how to rate Borderland, here's how I'm going to rate this movie. So overall, if you hate these 8 films to die for movies and wish they would actually be good, then don't fret, because we do have one that works, and it's definitely this film, which is worthy of being called a film to die for. So totally watch it by Borderland when you get the chance. And if you're wondering how I'm going to rank Borderland, I'm going to give Borderland an 8 out of 10. There we go. That wraps up my review for Borderlands. So you're wondering, now that we're down to 2 more final episodes, what's going to be the first of these last 2 episodes for this season? Well, our first of these is going to be an epic rant. And it's another anthology film. And it's actually not an original anthology film, it's an anthology sequel. A second sequel of this series. And you all pretty much know I did the first one of this franchise at the beginning of the year. Reviewed the sequel last week, I believe. So our next episode is going to be for the long dreaded Creepshow Free. That film is gonna get ripped an asshole on fire in the next episode. So get prepared for lots of yelling and lots of swearing in our next episode, because I'm going to be raged to shit. But until then, guys, that'll be it for this episode. Thank you all for watching. If you like this and want to see more, and don't forget to like, subscribe to Don G. Corleone.